Hey freedom fighters, Dog Soldier here. I can't believe I'm able to bring you another report. But in the interest of conveying good information, here it goes. Since I last reported, there's been a lot of developments in the world that are troubling, to say the least. There's lots of information about what's going on with Afghanistan and the 20 years that we were there and the fallout of that, the consequences of all of that. And there's the obvious ones of what it cost to actually wage that 20-year war. But then all the materials that are left behind and the lives that were lost and the people that were injured and came back with all kinds of problems, and the cost to the American people, not only in tax revenue, but all of the loss of freedom that came along with things like the Patriot Act. And it's really easy to get black-pilled by all of that bad stuff. And then, of course, we're going into the fall, and there's a prospect of lockdowns in different states and to different capacities, and passports and show me your papers and all of that good stuff. And we even have a U.S. Marine Corps lieutenant colonel going on the record in uniform, calling out leadership for being basically incompetent. And he ends up getting the boot, unsurprisingly. Creates a video afterwards saying, follow me. I'm capable of all kinds of things, and rally around me, kind of a thing. And it's we don't know what to make of that. We don't know whether or not it's a false, like a sort of a psyop. Is it a real legitimate person coming and doing this? And it just goes on and on and on. And it's very difficult to maintain any kind of sort of sense of getting back to normal, or can I just live my life without being constantly harassed and bombarded with psychological operations that are designed to make me feel anxious, to affect my business, to affect my family, and to affect my health, frankly. What is it that we can do? And there are a few options. The option that Marine Colonel was taking, I think, is a somewhat premature route to take. That is a really good way to get the occupying power to crush you individually. That, at this point in time, is probably not the best way to go. Forecasting, broadcasting what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, in a dangerous manner may get you locked up and or killed. And so that might not be the wisest thing to do. The fight response in that capacity, the kinetic fight response, is really probably not the way to go at this given moment in time. And then, of course, there is the mode of just giving into it all and just rolling with it and acquiescing to the new world system that we have in place, for good or ill. And there are many people that will probably do that. I think that there is a third way to combat this, and I think much of it has to do with just trying to exit out of the system as much as possible, economically, socially, even politically to some extent, at least at the federal level here in the United States. There's certainly lots of people making a good case, and I would include myself as one of them, as keeping involved locally. Local politics are important. County politics are important. Maybe even, depending on the state politics are important. But basically trying to exit the system, not participating in the commercialism, not participating in the values that are being brought forth. And for some, that really most effectively is pulling out of society entirely, becoming independent, which probably is a good thing anyway, from a lot of different perspectives. Sustainable agriculture, back to the land. There's lots of different names that we can go with that But basically, it boils down to leaving the worldly system behind and becoming as independent as possible. Economically, just exiting, not providing the tax revenue, not providing the support of the system. There is no doubt, any objective measure will tell you that the government that is in place, certainly in the United States, but even in other countries, is illegitimate. It is gotten to the point where the people have no semblance of what was created. Now, that died a long time ago. The Constitution and the protections that came therewith died a long time ago. That's a whole different video. I would argue it died in 1861 when a federal government decided to, at the point of a gun, tell other states that left by a democratic legislative process that they were going to leave. You cannot have a constitution that is enforced at the point of a gun. The consent of the governed is not there. But over the course of time, this has gotten even worse with the alphabet agencies and the corporate interests that have bought and sold our so-called representatives a long time ago. And so that isn't really anything that is worthy of debate at this point. I think that is, as would be said in legal parlance, is prima facie evidence that the system of governance is illegitimate and that it should be, by whatever means necessary, dismantled, decentralized. That is up to each individual person to determine how that goes. At this point in time, we are at the utilizing the legal systems to do that, utilizing the courts to do that to a certain extent, exiting from the system to as best we can. At some point in the future, that may change. That may change dramatically when certain lines are crossed. And we'll see. We shall see. There is some hope that some states will reassert their right, their sovereignty, and simply nullify the federal regime and the things that are being pushed off as legitimate will simply be ignored. There will be a de facto decentralization. There will be a de facto secession. And I think as time goes on, there will be, in fact, legal decentralization and secession. We'll see how that goes. Right now, the point is to resist as much as possible. To resist in whatever mean we can. And so what does that actually mean? How do we do that? How does one person who is now cut off from the public square in terms of virtually, of course you should be off Facebook, you should be off Twitter as much as possible, off of Google as much as possible, and connecting with people eyeball to eyeball, face to face. That's what you should be doing. In an era of potential COVID lockdowns, that will become harder to do. And that, unfortunately, I think is the plan. The powers that be, the occupying force, does not want good people, black or white, liberal or conservative, to be getting together at all, because they recognize that as soon as the people stop fighting each other on ridiculous issues and recognize that the true problem in society is the red-blue team against the population, that's when the trouble begins. That's a very dangerous statement. And people that say that, myself included, will be eliminated, or at least will attempt to be eliminated by whatever means necessary, because that is a liberating idea. But for now, we have an ability to talk. We have an ability to speak and communicate with each other and to network. And one of the things that individuals should be doing is, in their individual communities, getting to know and connecting with their neighbors, almost like a freedom cell of people with skill, or the skill set, with similar philosophy, similar lifestyle goals. It's only by in us getting together that we're going to be able to get through this. The system, the occupied system, has every interest in keeping us individuals that they can individually stomp out. Now, that's a process. It's a long process to do that. But if they can just keep it onesie, twosie here, onesie, twosie there, and little by little stomp out the resistors, that's their preferred route. When people start talking to each other, or when people start banding together and simply opting out, that's where the system crashes. The good news of all this is that the whole occupied system is a house of cards. At the end of the day, you cannot have an entity that prints money like it's going out of business in the denominations of trillions at this point, and have any expectation that it will last for a very, very long time. It's the dying. It's the death rattle of an empire. We just saw where the latest empire went to die, Afghanistan. A terrible tragedy on so many levels, of great cost, not only to the people of Afghanistan, but to the American people who've had to pay for it, not only with their dollars, but with the humiliations and restrictions that come along with travel post 9/11. And hopefully, the worse it gets, the more people recognize that they have been living in a dystopian nightmare. The worse that it becomes, people will recognize that the entity they thought was advocating for them is actually advocating against them. So I'm encouraging each of you to think of ways individually that you can reach out to others in your immediate community to build a freedom cell, to build a mutual assistance group for the purpose of just living life, if only to just have a social network of people that you feel comfortable with, that you can talk with. And that if things get rough, whether it's a natural disaster or political strife, that you have each other, not only to rely on in terms of your immediate needs, but by whatever other needs arise as a result of those trying times. We live in very difficult times, but I think together, it is together that I think that we'll be able to persevere. It's going to be rough for a little while. It will be rough. The mood seems to be that we're in the calm before the storm, that the economic troubles haven't really come, the political troubles haven't really come, and we'll see if the lines are going to be crossed by the occupied cabal that seems to be running things right now. But at some point, the people will reassert their freedom and their autonomy. They will do it at some point. It is simply the idea that cannot die. Freedom is a very, very important thing. It is something that must be defended, and it will be defended. Unfortunately, it requires a lot of people to wake up, to lose the illusion that we can only vote one person in who will change everything, or if we can only get the courts to do this, or only get a politician to do that. Those ideas of change are not going to work. A written constitution cannot enforce itself. And so we really have to look at how do we establish that individual autonomy and freedom locally.